there, welcome back to Coffee Over Apples. My name is Steph. If you've been following me for a minute, you'll probably notice that I'm wearing these earrings in almost every video because it's my favorite time of year. It's every reason to talk about horror. This is my monthly Patreon video in which my patrons vote for what book I make fan art for, and this month, I Was a Teenage Slasher by Stephen Graham Jones. I'm gonna put it right here next to Hannibal. This book was so much fun. Oh my god. If you love horror movies, if you love slasher movies, you are probably gonna have a great time with this. It was like funny. I was cackling, but I also cried. You know, there was a moment where I doubted Stephen Graham Jones because I've loved everything that I've read by him, and it wasn't much so far. I've read a couple at this point, including this, but I doubted him for like a second. And I was so wrong. By the time I was done with this book, I was so wrong for doubting him. It takes place in Texas in the 1980s. We are following a 17-year-old, I think, young white male. His name is Tolly Driver, I think his name. If that doesn't sound like the most slashery name. Like, Tolly Driver. Come on. Does it not give serial killer? His best friend Amber is Native American because of course it's Stephen Graham Jones. We have to have a Native American character. And what's interesting about this is I got this copy signed when I went to a Stephen Graham Jones book release, book tour for this. And it was so cool to hear him talk about his influences from his own childhood in Texas, doing really dumb shit with his friends. One of the opening scenes in here is a group of kids who are on this like pump jack, which I think is used for oil if I'm not mistaken. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. The kids try to like pause the machine in order to ride it like a bull. So you get brownie points and cool points if you don't die. This multi-ton thing where if a kid falls in it, it's going to smash them into bits. And lo and behold, it happens in the very beginning. This sets us up for just a bunch of like dumb teenage angst, which at first I was a little bit bored with. I'm not really a fan of like dumb teenagers go to parties and do stupid shit. Like that is not entertaining to me. Also, that's not really the kind of teenager that I was. Not that I'm saying I didn't do stupid shit, but I wasn't like a party person. But what happens at this party? Ooh, I was not prepared. I was not prepared. It's so cool. This book really does take what happens if we take the tropes and the cliches of slasher as a genre and just turn the dial up to 10. If you're not really familiar with the slasher genre, there might be some things in here that may not make sense. There are some scenes in which the characters are talking about like slasher things, and therefore in and of itself, it explains where the reference is coming from. But there's also other scenes where that doesn't happen. So if it seems a little far-fetched, if it seems very confusing, if you're not sure where this is going to go, then there's a chance if you're not a fan of those kinds of entertainment, then you're not going to be a fan of this. What I do want to say is that I think it's really important that this is the first Stephen Graham Jones book in which I've read that there is a non-Native American main character. It is a young white man who is the main character, and I think that is a very clear choice that the author has made in doing so. If you think about Jason, if you think about Michael Myers, if you think about Freddy, if you think about all these slasher movies, or if you think about just famous, lots of famous serial killers, not saying that all of them are white male, but statistically, what is it, like 80%? Editing stuff here with receipts. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, something of 82% of American serial killers are white, 15% recorded are black, and about 2.5% recorded are Hispanic. There's the facts. Just from thinking about how serial killers are usually framed and portrayed in media, that the author chose that demographic for their main character. But also villainizing brown characters is not usually a choice that I would support anyway. With that being said, I think it was very clear to me why he framed the main character the way that he did. What's interesting about this book is the way that our character becomes a slasher. I was of the impression when I first picked this up that it was a memoir of someone who chose to become a slasher, so that we would be getting the inside scoop as to what is going on in their head. Why would they choose to do such a thing? And in a way, it is, because in the very beginning, we find out that this is 17 years after Tolly has been a slasher. 17 years in which Tolly has had time to reflect and is writing about how they became a teenage slashers. It's one of those like book in a book situations, which, as it comes full circle at the end, was one of the best endings. I loved it. I was in tears. It was one of the most fun horror that I've read in a really long time. Moving into spoilers, I loved Amber and Tolly's relationship. The amount of tension between their friendship and the tension of what could have been really did break my heart. It made me so sad to see how Amber was trying to just save her friend the entire time. How Amber was really struggling to use the knowledge that she has of slasher movies to help her friend, but also not realize that she herself is falling into this role, because sometimes shit people are just shit people and there's nothing that you can do about it. But the way that the characters play around with slasher tropes, like the scene where he picks up a knife and it goes shing, and then he picks up a fork and it goes shing, and then it picks up a spoon and it makes a dull sound. Like, insane to me. I hope Stephen Graham Jones was cracking up when he wrote that scene, because I was cracking up. I thought it was hilarious. The way that they go to the hardware store and the chainsaw only turns on when he touches it, wild. But I loved that our main character was actually a reluctant villain. Like, I feel like it's not often that I read a reluctant villain written this well. It's just, it was incredible watching him go through the transformation, which is where I got the inspiration for this coloring page. When I tell you, there was the scene in the car in which he's turning into the slasher. She's looking at him from the driver's seat, like, in horror, and he's wrapping belts around his face going, "Run, Amber, run." I was cackling. It was so funny to me. Like, that's just a very comedic thing. But again, it's playing with the ridiculousness of the slasher, the ridiculousness of the mask, the ridiculousness of this person that is just can't be killed no matter what, because there's gotta be a sequel. And that to me is the driving factor as to why this book ended the way that it did. Tolly thinks that he gets away. Tolly thinks that he saves Amber by finally having some willpower in a moment of vulnerability where he may have been defeated for this section of the movie, and he runs away. So for 17 years, he thinks that he's just kind of living life and that the horror is done. But of course there's a sequel. Of course there's a return of the slasher. So she makes an appearance with her kid. Very, what is it, like very Jamie Lee Curtis, Michael Myers-esque of them. And he sees her and realizes that he has to jump to action before the slasher movie takes over his life again. And what he does, I thought it was brilliant, because I saw the peanut butter thing coming from a million miles away. Saw the peanut butter thing the moment that it was told in the very first few chapters that our main character, who is our villain, has a peanut allergy. I knew. It's like, it's gonna come back around. This is going to be the linchpin. This is going to be his kryptonite. But for it to come back around a third time, I was not expecting. And that was so masterful. And for him to have done it himself, just Amber finding all of his trophies that were hidden away just makes perfect sense. I don't think that they were necessarily in a cornfield, but them being in Texas, I know that there's a lot of flat land, that they were running through some kind of area. So forgive me if what I drew here looks like a cornfield. I just tried to make it relate to what I usually see in these horror slasher chasing someone through a cornfield type of movies, okay? I had fun with this. Give me a little bit of creative liberty here. Ultimately, I ended up rating this, I think, either a 4.5 or a 4.75. The reason I didn't give it 5 stars is because there was a really specific section in which Amber and Tolly were trying to figure out what's going on with the slasherness, right? And while that section was really fun, there felt like a lull in the action. And because of that, I got a little bit bored for like just a handful of pages. And because I felt that feeling of dropping off and being like, okay, Stephen Graham Jones, I trust you, but right now I need you to take me somewhere and do something with this. Yes, he came through. That section put me in a little bit of a lull where I did put this down for a day, was a little hesitant, thinking to myself, do I want to pick this up again? And I'm so glad that I did. But with that said, that feeling I feel like can't be ignored. So I gave it like a 4.5. I also pre-ordered Stephen Graham's next book that's coming out in 2025. I think Buffalo Hunters, something about vampires. I don't know, but this is up there in like favorite horror books. I would recommend this to anybody who says that they're a horror buff. Anyway, I hope you like this video. If you want to support my channel, I have a Patreon link below where you can vote for what coloring page and fan art I make next. I also have a book talk, and the link to the Sci-Fi Book Club, which I host with my friends to read sci-fi books if you want to join us, is in the description. I post videos whenever I feel like it. Thanks for watching. Bye!
What's making, Mr. Wonka?